Here we are, so excited because we have a special guest with us, someone that I've known for years and a fellow podcaster. He's one of the members of Podcast Rock City. Please welcome Joe Polo.
Hey, thank you for having me on. I totally appreciate it. I love it when I've done other stuff with you before.
You actually invaded our TV shows of 1978 episode last year when you were talking about Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park.
Yeah, that was awesome. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. The show's great.
Well, thank you. So this time, instead of talking about television, Kiss experience on television, we're going to be talking about the Marvel Comics relationship with the band Kiss. Now, give us some background, Joe. What's your experience growing up with Kiss and with comic book culture?
Well, for me, I didn't even know Kiss had a comic book until I got a little bit older. Like, the comic book came out, but I had no idea. I was more of the I had some comic books, but I was more of the I will watch superheroes on TV, cartoons kind of deal, you know? But as I got a little bit older, I started realizing that I love the format. I loved the pictures, I loved the drawings, I loved the stories, and I started getting into comic books at that point. And it was mostly the classic Spider-Man, the Hulk, that kind of thing. And then one day somebody came to me and went, "Do you have the Howard the Duck Kiss comics?" And I was like, "No." You know, it just was such a bizarre pairing to me. And I went and searched them out, and they weren't real expensive, but they were cool. And then somebody said, "Well, you got to get the super special." And I was like, "Okay, forget that." At that point, they were so expensive, there was no way I was going to get it. So it took a little bit of time. But superheroes and comic books have been a part of my life for a very long time.
And the funny thing is, we first met each other in real life at the very first Rockin' Pod Expo. Right. We're going to be going to the next one pretty soon. And it was funny that at the Rockin' Pod Expo, it's mostly music-related fans. But we end up bumping into each other at the Atlanta Comic-Cons. And then that's when we started putting pieces together, saying to each other, like, "Oh, boy, we both like a lot of the same things. It's not just Kiss. It's not just comics. Right." But when you're into Kiss, oftentimes you're into the whole area of fantasy and science fiction because they were in StarPodLog magazine. They embraced this lifestyle pretty much.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've noticed from meeting Kiss fans I've been doing my show for about 6 years now, and the one thing that I've noticed is there's certain things that connect everybody, and they usually are science fiction, rock and roll, and another one that really comes up a lot is professional wrestling, which again is very fantasy driven. You know, it's a storyline. It's, you know, the fighting is very much, if you look at a fight between, you know, pick any two superheroes and a villain, you know, it's very much a professional wrestling match.
Oh, totally. My brother and I were very into wrestling from a young age, and it's all intertwined, the wrestling action figures.
Even to the point where they had a Kiss wrestler.
Do you remember that in 1999 in WCW? How awesome was that?
Yeah. Dale Torborg was the guy who played. At first, it was another guy, and then they put Dale Torborg into the costume and the makeup, and that lasted for a little while. But actually, I interviewed him. I think Podcast Rock City was the only podcast he's ever done, because at the beginning, we had a friend of mine, Lee. She was on the show at the very, very beginning, and she actually used to work out with him and hang out with him. So he did the show and told us the whole story of the demon wrestler and learning to breathe fire and how much WCW really didn't want the demon wrestler. But it's, you know, it was pretty interesting. But as far as comic books go, Kiss and comic books, they're like brothers. They fit so perfectly.
What were some of your favorite comics growing up?
Oh man, I always loved Spider-Man. I have a deep, like, I feel like I have a connection with Spider-Man. Especially with Peter Parker. As far as I got into the X-Men, but later. I love Superman, even though I don't feel like he has enough villains, good villains. But I love Superman. I love the whole idea of Superman. I'm not a huge Batman fan, to be honest with you, and some people freak out on me when I say that. But I love Batman, but I'm not like I'm not flipping out every time. Avengers, and then later on, I really got into the Image stuff. I kind of got out of comics for a while because I had to become an adult, and then I realized I could do both.
And which is awesome because you're a music teacher and you own a musical instrument store, so you're able to be an adult but have some fun stuff in your life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I try to. I have my jobs are the. You've heard Gene Simmons say before, you find a job that you love doing and you'll never work a day in your life. And all I do is play guitar all day and I get paid for it. It's amazing. Not the same level as like a rock band, but still I still play guitar every day and get paid for it.
Tell us about your music store.
I actually opened a music store up in West Georgia in a town called Villa Rica. It's called Trackside Music Lessons because we're literally 50 yards away from the train tracks. And when the trains come through, you just have to stop for a minute because they blow their horns. But it's really not. It doesn't really interrupt anything. But I always wanted to have a music store since I had a buddy that had a music store, and I was like, I could do this. And I worked for him for about 18 years before I decided, all right, let's pull the trigger. And my girlfriend Karen and I found a place, and we went for it. So it's very cool.
Does it have any Kiss or comic book influences in the store?
Okay, it will. Not yet. I haven't started bringing stuff into the store yet that I want to because I'm a little nervous about the and I haven't had a huge clientele yet, so I'm not really sure where they'll stand on a big, Gene Simmons posters hanging on the wall. But I will tell you that Karen, because I have a ton of posters that I can't put up anywhere because my house is. I have a designated area for all my Kiss stuff, so it doesn't overflow, And Karen told me you should put it up in the store, and I'm like, I will, but I'm gonna wait and make sure because you never know when you're gonna have a parent's like that's satanic.
Well, we look forward to visiting your store, supporting your store, but none of this would be possible, wouldn't you agree, if Kiss didn't cross-promote or have some influence in the comic book and toy and memorabilia market in the 1970s? I mean, that's how I get introduced to Kiss, is through all these mediums.
Yes, I agree 100%. The pockets of Marvel and toy stores and all these companies that make toys, they're lined with Kiss money. Forever and ever they've been coming up with products. I mean, just sitting in my room right now. I mean, I'm in front of me right now. I have the Kiss Compendium. You know what that is?
Yes.
I mean, you're talking about a book.
Yeah.
A book that is $75 that has just about every Kiss comic ever put out.
It's huge too. It's a monster volume.
Yes. So even I just don't know how to explain it. Even the comic book companies were able to put all their stuff together and put it in a book. So you didn't have to. If you couldn't buy all the comics, you could just buy this one book for $75, which, by the way, to me is a huge deal because you're talking about, I don't know how many comic books are in this thing, but it's probably 100 or more. Plus the stories about the first super special and how they put the blood in the ink. Did you want to get into that?
Yeah, well, let's start from the beginning. The relationship with Kiss and Marvel. Marvel started out with Howard the Duck issues 12 and 13 in 1977, and this is during the era where Destroyer was getting big.
Right, and it was perfect timing.
Yeah, but the Kiss was at that time where they were building momentum because it was right after Alive. So it was a genius point on their part to get involved in the comic scene. And even though these were more dream sequences, it's established that they are part of the Marvel Universe.
Oh yeah, no, that's true. It's really funny because I keep waiting for some kind of a little like hats off to Kiss in the Marvel Universe movies. It doesn't have to be an appearance by them, but it could be a mentioning of them. Like in that in the Winter Soldier when they've got that guy on the roof and he mentions Stephen Strange before we ever saw Stephen Strange. And he mentions a few other, when Captain America and them were getting ready to throw him off the roof of the. But I don't know if you remember that, but anyway,
totally.
They could always mention, Kiss. I don't know how well that would go over, but they do. They are part of the Marvel Universe. I mean, we had Howard the Duck in the end of 2 of the movies.
Absolutely. And what's amazing about these issues is that they were drawn by Gene Colan, who is an artist known for doing Tomb of Dracula. So you have an artist that has more of a horror background drawing the first time Kiss is ever in a comic book. So I think that adds some weight to the characters as well.
If you look at Gene, he very much has this vampire look about him.
And out of the entire line of Howard the Duck comics, those are the 2 most sought after issues for obvious reasons.
That is amazing to me. I mean, first of all, Howard the Duck is when you read the character and you know about the character, it's a very strange idea. It's not the typical bit by a spider, kind of deal. But the fact that they put Kiss in with Howard the Duck, it's at first glance it seems kind of strange, but it kind of fits.
Yeah, and Howard the Duck is more of a satire type comic. It's more bizarre. It's totally on the fringe of the Marvel Universe. It's not the core superheroes by any means. But to use this as a gateway to see how does Kiss fit into the comic world was ingenious because it did do well. And so Kiss's people got together with Marvel's people and decided to create Marvel Super Special #1. And Bill Aucoin was very involved with this, as well as Sean Delaney.
Yeah, and I really like that book. I like it a lot. I know there was all this folklore about the blood and the ink and everything, and I didn't get it until years later. So I never really had any friends that were like telling me, oh, their blood is in here or anything like that. So I missed out on that whole thing. However, I will tell you that years later, I was at a comic book show or something, and this guy had the first comic, the first Marvel Super Special. But it was attached with a Sports Illustrated, right? So he had the Marvel and he had the Sports Illustrated and it had Big Bird on it. And I remember going, what's the deal with this? And he goes, the blood that went into the ink, but the ink went into this Sports Illustrated. It didn't go into the Marvel Super Special. Now, have you heard that before?
I have. In fact, that at a comic convention some years ago, I was in the audience, my wife and I, and Stan Lee was the speaker, and I got to ask him about what it was like to work with Kiss and put the blood into the ink. And he said it was a great experience. I didn't go in further and ask him whatever happened with it. I figured I'd let him talk about it if he wanted to, but that's part of the legend. There's numerous legends about them pouring the blood into the ink. And if you notice, the centerfold of that issue shows them getting their blood drawn, pouring it into the ink. Some have said no, it was just for photos. Some have said I was right there. I watched them pour it in. And then the other legend is the containers got mixed up and it went into Sports Illustrated. So I think that's one of the fun things about Kiss. It's not just they're a band, but they're legend upon legend. There's so many stories involved.
Oh yeah, and like I said, so when I was standing there and the guy was telling me the story, and now at the time I did not own the Super Special. So the guy had the Super Special with the Sports Illustrated for one price, and I just bought it up. And now I take so much pride in informing people this is the magazine with blood in it from Kiss.
That is so awesome that you have both. And being a hardcore Kiss collector, that's just one more piece of minutia that we need for our collections.
Oh yeah, and those little small little things that you could go, you know what this is?
Do you recall what issue that is?
Yeah, let's see. It says June 6, 1977, Sports Illustrated, Mark Fidrich from the Tigers, and Big Bird is behind him. That's one of those things that I think every Kiss fan should have in there, and comic book fan for that matter. Even if they're not to me, having the Sports Illustrated is just as important for the story as having the actual Super Special.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the comic book itself, once again, they're establishing them in the Marvel universe. Gene used to have his own Marvel fanzine. He was publishing as a teenager his own outlet for trading comics because he couldn't get the comics that he wanted. So he would buy in bulk, sell, be able to get the issues that he want. Apparently, he when I saw Gene at the Knoxville comic convention, it's called Fanboy Expo, I got a chance to talk to him. He says he collects original art, and he has hundreds and hundreds of pages of original Silver Page art. You can imagine what, if you're a fan with his income, the things that he must own.
Oh yeah, I actually have two really cool stories. I know how big of a comic book fan you are. So, are you aware of the store down here called Dr. Knows?
Oh yeah, I love that guy. He actually started that comic magazine years ago. What was it called? The comic book scene or the comic book? It was one of those freebies that they would give you. It was a weekly.
Yeah, it would be in every store. I can't think of the name of it right now, but his name is Cliff. I think it's Cliff Biggers. Mr. Biggers was a high school teacher at the high school that I went to.
Oh man, how cool is that?
Yeah, and we all knew that he would walk into his classroom and he would have stand-ups of like Wolverine or whatever in the classroom. And then we would go to his store, and I talked to him just about a year ago or a year and a half ago when this other Kiss comic came out, and he told me so he had just done a story in that paper. Comic Shop News, is that?
Yeah, that's what it was. Comic Shop News, yes.
He had done a story, an interview with Gene, and so I picked up a copy of that, and he told me, he goes, I have fanzines that I used to write in that Gene wrote in at home. So as a kid,
really crazy.
It's crazy. And it's like, to me anyway, it's just like the most mind-blowing thing. So, and then that was one story, and that's pretty cool. And one day I was driving down the road and I was listening to Gene's book for probably the 40th time because I drive an hour to work. So, and he mentioned movies, like when he was a kid, comic books and movies, TV, and he mentioned loving this movie called Gorgo, which was like the British version of Godzilla. Are you aware of this?
Not at all. I've never seen Gorgo.
Okay, so I've never seen it. But he mentioned it, and my son is a huge Godzilla fan, so it really caught my interest. Well, maybe the same day or the day after, I walked into this like antique store, And I'm walking through, and all of a sudden, boom, there it is. Gorgo #1, the comic book. And I go, this is so freaking bizarre. So it was like $5. I picked it up, I paid for it, and I said, one day I'll meet Gene Simmons and I'm going to give him this. Fast forward, like 3 years later, my buddy Bruce buys a vault. So I go to the vault with him, and I said, hey, Gene, I got a present for you. And he goes, it doesn't tick, does it? And I go, and I handed it to him, and he goes, Gorgo, like a kid. And he finished signing something for my buddy Bruce, and then he opened it, and he stood there with me, pulled that comic book out, and told me, did you know that the artist that drew the cover is different than the artist on the inside? Because they didn't like the way he drew hands. So they drew, it's just this like massive ball of information just started coming out of him about freaking Gorgo that I'd never heard of in my entire life until he mentioned it. And then I just happened to walk into some antique store, and there it was. And he thanked me a few times, actually, and he kept it. And I was really, I was impressed by how much he knew about that comic, that exact comic. He told me the name of the author, of the artist on the cover, the name of the author, the artist on the inside. I was just like, dude.
His ability to pull out information. Like me, it takes me a couple seconds to think about it. When I met him, he was talking about Silver Age Spider-Man, and he just said, I collect Steve Ditko art, and I'd get my hands on anything that I can. And then he said, and if you notice some of the other issues where that has Jack Kirby, he doesn't know how to draw Spider-Man as well. I mean, he's a nerd just like us. He gets it. He looks for all the little things. He follows who the creators are. And I think that's what made these issues of Marvel Super Special #1 and 5 so unique, because he was involved in the process as well. He wasn't just one where they modeled characters after him. He said that he used to go to the offices and ask Stan Lee what he would think about his costume ideas, and he would draw them out, and Stan would say, I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this. I mean, can you imagine back in the mid-'70s, that relationship between Gene Simmons and Stan Lee? How...
Yeah, I imagine it would be like if I had a relationship with Gene Simmons. Starry-eyed and, very much just in awe of who I'd be sitting there and talking to. I imagine that once they became friends, he relaxed a little, but I bet at the beginning he was just like, Stanley,
Well, Gene said that, because he was talking to a bunch of us that were at the con, he said, back in those days, you could just walk into Marvel offices and talk to Stan. It wasn't mainstream then, so it was totally acceptable to just sit there on the couch and talk to him.
That is unbelievable.
Isn't it crazy?
It really is.
Another fascinating thing is when we look at Marvel Super Special #1, we see the talismans, they're little dolls and a star. Notice how it transitions in Marvel Super Special #5, so it coincides with the Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park movie, because now they're realizing, wait a second, this is all connected. This is a shared universe. People who are going to watch the movie are going to read the comic, so we have to tie everything in.
And then they did. And I love the movie too, so I'm one of those people that I could watch it 2 or 3 times a year, get a good little giggle, and enjoy myself,
Totally.
But they did connect it, which was one of the smartest things they could have possibly done. Oddly enough, I'm not a big fan of the art in this one as I am in the first one. I don't know why. I feel like when I look at it, it feels a little rushed. Not like some of the other ones that have come out since. We don't even want to get into that. I mean, of course I own them, but it was a one read kind of thing. But
yeah, Marvel Super Special #5 is when they brought in John Romita Jr., and that's John Romita Sr.'s son. So this is some of his earliest work. And so it's not as awesome as he is now. I mean, John Romita Jr. is known for his epic Spider-Man work. So we're looking at like a young artist getting a crack at things. And based on his age, it's probably him being a fan saying, Dad, can you get me to work on this? And John Romita Sr. pulling strings saying, sure, we'll get you on this.
And you know what? I like that idea better. I like that. I like that story better than me just looking at it and going, if thinking about a fan drawing it sounds even cooler. I'll tell you some of the other things that I noticed about them, which I thought was really cool, was there's a few times where Peter is drawn in these like poses, like he's jumping or flying through the air, and
Yes.
they very much remind me of things that you would see in Phantom of the Park.
Very much so, even that they used the superpowers more so that were established in Phantom of the Park, like Ace using his teleportation.
Yeah, in the first issue, he uses it through the whole thing.
Yep.
And it's just so smart the way they put that all together. Of course, everybody wishes that the TV show would have been maybe written better or whatever, but at the same time, if that would have been the case, we wouldn't have this legendary, movie.
I love it just the way it is because it's so strange, it's so bizarre that it's compelling to rewatch it.
Yeah, once one of my buddies was like, it's so bad, it's awesome. And I was like, I don't even know if I would say it's bad. I would just say, I never really saw that. I saw that whenever I watch it, even now I go, it's just it's really, it's not that bad. I mean, if you think about when it was made and the special effects, you're not going to, I understand that they pitched it to him, Hard Day's Night, Star Wars, but, and of course that's not what we got, but it's so unique and it's so perfectly Kiss. There's nothing wrong with it. It's great.
And another funny thing about these comics, even though they were produced in 77 and 78, did you notice that they were making reference to the Elder? So they called the enemy beings the Elder, and then fast forward 1981, you have the Elder album. And then you have Marvel Super Special number 5, when Paul is using his star power, he's absorbing the energy from fans and he's expelling it as pure hate. And I'm thinking about the Kiss song Hate. When you read these through the lens of a Kiss fan through their lyrics, even though it wasn't intended for later on, you're like, man, the Kiss universe is pretty amazing because it does have connections.
I'll tell you something else that I thought was really unique is I thought there would be more references to Kiss songs there was a few, but actual Kiss songs like King of the Nighttime World and that kind of stuff, but there wasn't. I would have thought that they would have worked it in a lot. Like you fast forward to the Image stuff, it's everywhere through those comics, but in here it's just a few times. I also thought it was really interesting that they mentioned, I think in the second one, maybe it's the second one, they mentioned Peter Max. Do you know who Peter Max is?
Oh yeah, you can see that imagery in Marvel Super Special number 5 that influence is there.
Yeah, and he's I think it's Ace that says we just landed in a Peter Max painting or something like that, and I thought, wow, that's pretty unusual to pull him out. This Peter Max was this legendary painter.
Well, he did so much stuff for the Beatles. And Kiss loves the Beatles. That was total Ace personality there. Even with the banter in between them, you could tell that they had some involvement because they were saying things like "Hey Curly," things that Ace would normally say in real life.
Yeah, he said "Hey Curly" a lot in that. Yeah, it's all really good stuff. It's all really good stuff. I'm impressed every time I open it up. And honestly, I hadn't cracked this open in maybe 2 years since I probably have 3 copies of the compendium. because I stumble across them in bookstores for, $10, $20. And I'm like, this is a $75 book. I'm going to buy it, And I came across one that somebody actually put like a plastic book cover over to protect it, so that's the one I brought upstairs. But Kiss and comic books, it's like two peas in a pod. They were totally made for each other.
Absolutely. And it was an era that was so unique in history. And Joe, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about Podcast Rock City and what our listeners can expect in the future. Recently, you've been having What If episodes. That's that Marvel tie-in. What would happen if, we all love those Marvel comics, you put a Kiss twist on it. So what else do we have to expect from Podcast Rock City in the future?
Well, there's a whole, of course, we're always stirring the pot, whether it's our game shows or we try to get good guests on.
But I know that we're going to see you at the Rockin' Pod Expo with Jody Havnot as well as Sunny Hollywood Pooney.
Yes. And we'll be there and, like I said, doing the what ifs with our listeners and anybody that wants to sit down. And, basically the what ifs are just like the Marvel what ifs. What if Wolverine had never gotten adamantium in his bones? It's like, what if Paul Stanley had decided to take the makeup off 3 records earlier? That basically, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they're exciting episodes. We love listening to them. And Joe, thank you so much for joining us here on StarPodLog.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long and may the force be with you. Nanu Nanu.